A shibboleth is either a saying that people repeatedly cite that is wrong or thought to be wrong by some, or a word or custom whose variations in pronunciation or style distinguish members of in-groups from those of out-groups, with an implicit value judgment based on familiarity with the shibboleth. In numerous cases of conflict between groups speaking different languages or dialects, one side used ShibolEths in a way similar to the above-mentioned biblical use, that is, to discover hiding members of the opposing group. Modern researchers use the term ShibolEth for all such uses, whether or not the people involved were using it themselves. In modern American English, a shibboleth also has a wider meaning, referring to any in-group word or phrase that can distinguish members of a group from outsiders, even when not used by a hostile other group. The word is less well recognized in British English and possibly some other English-speaking groups. It is also sometimes used in a broader sense to mean jargon, the proper use of which identifies speakers as members of a particular group or subculture. The term shibboleth can also be extended, as in the discipline of semiotics, to describe non-linguistic elements of culture such as diet, fashion and cultural values. Cultural touchstones and shared experience can also be shibboleths of a sort. For example, people about the same age who are from the same nation tend to have the same memories of popular songs, television shows, and events from their formative years. One-hit wonders prove particularly effective. Much the same is true of alumni of a particular school, veterans of military service, and other groups. Discussing such memories is a common way of bonding. In-jokes can be a similar type of shared experience shibboleth. Yet another more pejorative usage involves underlining the fact that the original meaning of a symbol has in effect been lost and that the symbol now serves merely to identify allegiance, being described as nothing more than a shibboleth. Nobel Prize laureate economist Paul Samuelson applied the term shibboleth in works including Foundations of Economic Analysis to an idea for which the means becomes the end, and the letter of the law takes precedence over the spirit. Samuelson admitted that shibboleth is an imperfect term for this phenomenon, and sometimes used fetish as a synonym, though he complained that the latter has too pejorative a ring. Shibboleths have been used by different subcultures throughout the world at different times. Regional differences, level of expertise, and computer coding techniques are several forms that shibboleths have taken. The legend goes that before the Guldenspruitslag Battle of the Golden Spurs in May 1302, the Flemish slaughtered every Frenchman they could find in the city of Bruges, an act known as the Brugsmitten. They identified Frenchmen based on their inability to pronounce the Flemish phrase schild en vriend, shield and friend, or possibly s gilden vriend, friend of the guilds. However, many medieval Flemish dialects did not contain the cluster sch either. Even today's Kortrijk dialect has sk, and medieval French rolled the r just as Flemish did. In October 1937 the Spanish word for parsley, perigel, was used as a shibboleth to identify Haitian immigrants living along the border in the Dominican Republic. The President of the Dominican Republic, Rafael Trujillo, ordered the execution of these people. It is alleged that between 20,000 and 30,000 individuals were murdered within a few days in the Parsley Massacre, although more recent scholarship and the lack of evidence such as mass graves puts the actual total as low as 1,000. During the Black July riots of Sri Lanka in 1983 many Tamils were massacred by Sinhalese youths. In many cases these massacres took the form of boarding buses and getting the passengers to pronounce words that had hardbas at the start of the word, like baldia, bucket, and executing the people who found it difficult. During World War II, some United States soldiers in the Pacific Theater used the word Lollapalooza as a shibboleth to challenge unidentified persons, on the premise that Japanese people often pronounce the letter L as R or confuse RS with LS. The word is also an American colloquialism that even a foreign person fairly well versed in American English would probably mispronounce or be unfamiliar with. In George Stimson's A Book About 1,000 Things, the author notes that, in the war, Japanese spies would often approach checkpoints posing as American or Filipino military personnel. A shibboleth such as Lollapalooza would be used by the sentry, who, if the first two syllables come back as Rora, would open fire without waiting to hear the remainder. During the Allied breakout from the Normandy beachheads in 1944, hand-to-hand fighting occurred throughout the hedgerows and thick undergrowth of the Norman countryside. British and American troops were told to use the word thunderer as a counter-sign through the thick foliage. Given the number of syllables and the leading th sound, it was believed that the word would invariably be mispronounced by native German speakers. During the Troubles in Northern Ireland, use of the name Derry or Londonderry for the province's second-largest city was often taken as an indication of the speaker's political stance, and as such frequently implied more than simply naming the location. The pronunciation of the letter H is a related shibboleth, with Catholics and Protestants often pronouncing the letter differently.
Yeah.
We're all set.
What am I doing?
Pardoning a turkey.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Excellent.
I think you'll like this.
Mr. Meister, Meridian 3000 series, one-piece forged blade, riveted palm handles.
Terrific.
I don't like the handles.
Okay.
Mr. President,
How's it going?
sir, we've taken a couple dozen meetings in the last 2 days.
You met with Chinese embassy officials?
Last night, they say...
Christians aren't persecuted in China. Since they're not oppressed, they don't qualify for refugee status.
Under U.S. or UN conditions, yeah.
They also make the point that they broke Chinese law when they left the country illegally and should be sent back to their country of origin.
It's a fair point.
The INS agents also feel it's not uncommon in this situation for refugees to, how do I put it, feign faith.
Yeah, they'll be coached.
So how do you tell the difference between...
You guys know what a shibboleth is?
It's a catchphrase, isn't it?
A cliche.
Comes from the Bible. Then said now unto him, Say now ShibolEth, and he said ShibolEth, for he could not frame to pronounce it right. It was a password, a way the army used to distinguish true Israelites from imposters sent across the River Jordan by the enemy.
Sir...
I'm having one of the Chinese refugees flown here. I'll meet with him tonight.
Mr. President, I can't, indefinitely with the turkey.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mr. President, what are you going to ask the Chinese refugee?
I'm going to ask him to say ShibolEth.
Mr. President?
Is he here?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Did we get an interpreter?
He speaks English. He's a chemistry professor.
Yeah?
There was a while there I wanted to be a chemistry professor.
What happened?
I never actually studied chemistry.
A lot of these college chemistry departments are really demanding that way.
Yeah.
Mr. President?
Jen Wei?
Yes, sir.
I'm Jed Bartlett. This is Leo McGarry.
How do you do?
Thank you for coming all this way.
Yes, sir.
Fellas, would you mind waiting outside?
Certainly, sir.
Would you care to sit down? It's perfectly all right. Some sandwiches here. If you get hungry, you should feel free to eat as much as you please.
Yes, sir.
There are questions as to the veracity of your claim to asylum.
Yes, sir.
How did you become a Christian?
I began attending a house church with my wife in Fujian. Eventually, I was baptized.
How do you practice?
We share Bibles. We don't have enough. We sing hymns. We hear sermons. We recite the Lord's Prayer. We are charitable.
Who's the head of your church?
The head of our parish is an 84-year-old man named Wen Ling. He's been beaten and imprisoned many times. The head of our church is Jesus Christ.
Can you name any of Jesus' apostles? If you can't, that's okay. I usually can't remember the names of my kids, or for that matter.
Peter, Andrew, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, Thaddeus, Simon, Judas, and James. Mr. President, Christianity is not demonstrated through a recitation of facts. You're seeking evidence of faith, a wholehearted acceptance of God's promise of a better world. For we hold that man is justified by faith alone, is what St. Paul said. justified by faith alone. Faith is the true... I'm trying to... ShibolEth. Faith is the true ShibolEth.
Yes, it is. And you, sir, just said the magic word in more ways than one. Thank you. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Mr. President.